My grandson said, "Grandma, I want to leave right now." His small voice trembled, tiny, but it landed in the wedding hall like a clap of thunder. His little fingers tightened around my hand, cold as ice. My heart jolted. I could barely breathe. I bent down, urgency in my voice. "What's the matter, sweetheart?" He looked up at me, eyes wide, panic written all over his face. Then he whispered, shaking as if about to cry, "Grandma, you haven't looked under the table, have you?" I froze. A cold rush ran down my spine. My heart hammered as I slowly lowered my eyes, and my whole body went rigid. Without saying a word, I squeezed his small hand and rose to my feet with him. In that instant, I knew. This was beyond ordinary, and I had to act immediately. If you're listening to my story right now, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I just want to see how far this story can travel, and maybe, just maybe, it will touch someone's heart along the way. I don't share this to blame or to judge, but with the hope that what I've been through might become a small light, guiding someone else through their own hard times. The banquet hall that evening glowed with candlelight, each flame shimmering against crystal vases on every table. White roses stood tall and perfect, their petals unfolding pure as snow. The light bounced off polished silver plates, filling the room with a glow that was both elegant and festive. Soft jazz drifted through the air, rising and falling in rhythm, blending with the low hum of conversations and the gentle clinking of glasses. Sitting there, I felt as though I had stepped into another world, far removed from the everyday worries outside. It was the day my son, Nathan Hartman, married his second wife, Sabrina Monroe. Nathan wore a navy blue suit that fit him perfectly, his posture upright and radiant as he moved from table to table, smiling nonstop. Watching him, my heart swelled with both pride and sorrow, for that smile, to me, was not just happiness. It also seemed like his way of hiding the unhealed void left behind after the passing of Isabel Ruiz. I sat at table number 8, right beside my little grandson. Caleb was only 7, his face still tender with tousled hair falling slightly across his forehead. Unlike other children who were laughing and chasing each other around the hall, he sat quietly, sliding a small red toy car back and forth across the pristine white tablecloth, as if building his own little world where he could feel safe. Looking at him, a wave of aching tenderness rose in me, because every time I gazed at his small face, I caught glimpses of Isabel, his late mother, and the daughter-in-law I had loved as my own child. Isabel had been so gentle, so kind, that even the memory of her smile warmed my heart. And perhaps that's why, when Caleb's eyes glimmered in the candlelight, it felt as if I were looking into Isabel's eyes once more. From my seat, I caught the warm gaze of Harold and May Jenkins, an elderly couple who had known our family for many years. They smiled and tilted their heads, remarking on how quickly Caleb was growing. I smiled back, then carefully cut a small piece of cake and set it on the plate before him. Caleb looked up, his eyes shining with quiet gratitude, then bent his head again, clutching his red car tightly and continuing his silent play. The sight stirred a mix of love and sadness in me, for a 7-year-old boy should have been carefree, yet here he was, clinging to peace in something as small as a toy. On stage, Gregory Shaw, the master of ceremonies, filled the hall with his booming, cheerful voice. At times, he urged guests to raise their glasses in blessing. At others, he invited the bride and groom up for photos. With ease, he kept the atmosphere lively and spirited. I followed Nathan with my eyes as he bowed and thanked each table, that bright smile fixed on his face, as though determined to show the world he had truly found joy again. And then there was Sabrina, radiant in her beaded gown that sparkled under the golden lights. Her wavy brown hair framed her face, and the bold red lipstick made her wide smile look flawless, almost too perfect. She stood among her friends, striking poses for the cameras, the kind of presence that demanded the whole room's attention. Yet as I watched, a strange unease crept into me. It was subtle, hard to name, but it clung to my heart like a thorn. I told myself it was only my imagination, a flicker of oversensitivity. Still, I sat there quietly, trying to push away the uneasy feeling that had begun to settle deep inside me. Sitting there in the middle of the wedding, I couldn't stop my thoughts from drifting back to Isabel, the first daughter-in-law we lost too soon. She had been so gentle, so kind, that her smile alone could light up the entire house. I still remember those golden afternoons on the outskirts of Phoenix when I would visit her and my son. Caleb was just learning to walk then, toddling across the backyard, his little hands swatting at a colorful rubber ball. Isabel would stand on the porch, a basket of fresh vegetables in her arms, watching her boy with eyes full of warmth and a smile as soft as the morning sun. She was always thoughtful, always sweetly asking me, "Mom, try this chili I cooked. Tell me if it's right." Then she would place a steaming bowl in front of me, her face bright with anticipation, waiting for my praise. I would sit at the small wooden table, eating and chatting about the simplest things, and yet my heart felt so full. Caleb would crawl around the floor clutching an old toy car, while Isabel sat nearby carefully slicing fruit into neat little pieces for everyone. That moment was so peaceful, so whole, that I once believed my son's happiness could never run dry. But life had other plans. The memory most vivid and most painful is the night Caleb fell terribly ill. His body burned with fever, his little eyes struggling to stay open, his breaths coming fast and shallow. He was too weak even to cry. Isabel clutched him close, tears spilling onto his flushed cheeks, whispering through trembling lips, "Mom, I'm so scared." I sat right beside her, laying warm cloths on his forehead, soothing them both as best I could, though inside my chest it felt like a boulder pressing me down. None of us slept a wink that night. When dawn finally broke, Caleb's fever began to ease. He drifted into sleep in his mother's arms, while Isabel turned to me, her eyes still swollen from tears, and forced a fragile smile. "Thank you, Mom. Without you, I wouldn't have known what to do." I simply squeezed her hand, silently promising I would always be there for them. I had believed that little family would stay whole forever, like a song without an ending. But one fateful afternoon, as I stood in the kitchen washing dishes, the phone rang. The dry, formal voice of a police officer on the other end pierced straight through me. "We're very sorry. There's been an accident." My hands shook so violently that I dropped a plate, shattering it on the floor. Isabel was gone in an instant, struck when a runaway truck slammed into her car on the highway. The funeral was drenched in heavy rain, each drop falling as though the heavens themselves wept for her. Caleb, only 4 years old, clung to me, his innocent eyes wide with confusion. He whispered, "Grandma, where's my mom?" I swallowed my tears, held him tight, and told him, "She's in a beautiful place now, sweetheart." But inside, my heart was breaking apart. Nathan collapsed by the casket, his shoulders shaking uncontrollably, his eyes hollow, as if half his soul had been buried with his wife. After that, Nathan was never the same. He buried himself in work, leaving at dawn and returning long after Caleb had fallen asleep. I knew it was his way of escaping the pain, the void no one could fill. But the one who suffered most was Caleb. Once lively, he became quiet, withdrawn, his eyes carrying a sadness far too heavy for a child, as if he wished for a miracle to bring his mother back. He clung to me, and I became his only anchor. Every day I walked him to school. Every night I sat by his bed, telling him stories until he slept. Without fail, he would plead, "Grandma, tell me about Mom." And I would choke back my tears and speak of the days Isabel sang him lullabies, or how she cut fruit into the little pieces he loved so much. In that way, Isabel's memory never faded from his young mind, nor from my heart. Through those difficult years, thank goodness we had Lily Chambers, my adopted daughter. Lily had a warm heart and skillful hands, often dropping by with coloring books or trays of freshly baked cookies. She loved Caleb like a little brother, carrying him, teaching him letters, sitting patiently by his side for hours as he scribbled messy drawings. "Look, your house is even better than mine," she would say with a laugh, her cheerful voice filling the house with light. And I noticed, whenever Nathan walked into the room, there was something fleeting in Lily's eyes, something deeper than ordinary care. I saw it, but I chose silence. Because in those days, when our family was still raw from loss, sometimes the most important thing was simply keeping the flame from going out. I still remember vividly the first day Sabrina Monroe stepped into our home. From the doorway, she flashed a bright smile carrying a shiny gift basket filled with pastries and chocolates, greeting me politely with a voice sweet as honey. She even asked, "Can I help you with anything in the kitchen?" The kind of thing that sounds so thoughtful, so considerate. To anyone else, she would have seemed the picture of a perfect, gracious woman. But not to me. In every gesture, every glance, I felt something cold underneath. It was like makeup laid on flawlessly, but beneath it, there was only emptiness. That day, Caleb sat curled up on the corner of the sofa, clutching his little red toy car, eyes darting away as if he didn't want to acknowledge anyone. Sabrina crouched down, holding out a chocolate bar with a soft smile. "Here, sweetheart, try this. It's delicious." But Caleb just shook his head, eyes fixed on the floor, gripping the toy car even tighter, as though it were his shield. For the briefest second, I saw Sabrina's eyes flash with irritation, sharp, almost scolding, before her face slipped right back into its gentle smile as if nothing had happened. It was enough for me to know that her kindness was anything but natural. Another time, in the kitchen when only the two of us were present, I overheard Sabrina's voice, sharp, cold, stripped of the sweetness she always put on display. She was speaking to Caleb, her tone cutting like a knife. "You're not a baby anymore. You need to grow up and do things on your own." Those weren't words of guidance. They were barbs meant to wound, aimed at a boy already too fragile. I walked in at that moment and instantly Sabrina turned, her sugary smile returning as she chirped, "Oh, you're here. Let me wash the dishes for you." But the thorn in my heart had already lodged deeper, stinging with every beat. Then there was the day we went to the supermarket. Caleb accidentally dropped a box of cereal. Panicked, he bent down to pick it up, his little face flushed with fear of being scolded. I was about to comfort him when Sabrina's voice cut through, loud and sharp. "You're so clumsy, everyone's looking at you." She spoke so loudly that strangers nearby turned their heads. Caleb froze, clutching the cereal box with trembling hands, barely daring to breathe. I saw his eyes well up red, and though my chest burned with anger, I bit my tongue. To outsiders, it may have seemed like she was simply being strict, but I knew better. It wasn't discipline, it was humiliation, a way of pressing down on him. To anyone else, these moments might have seemed small, easy to dismiss. But to me, someone who has lived long enough, who has known enough loss, intuition never lies. I could feel it clearly. Hidden beneath Sabrina's polished facade were sharp thorns, subtle, discreet, but pricking deeper every day, warning me that behind that gentle smile lurked a dangerous kind of deceit. One afternoon, I went to pick Caleb up from school. The playground was alive with the laughter of children, but my grandson sat quietly in a corner, eyes fixed on the ground, turning an old toy car over and over in his hands. The sight pierced my heart. His teacher, Ms. Diane Cooper, gently pulled me aside, her voice filled with concern. "Mrs. Hartman, I've noticed Caleb has become so withdrawn lately. In class, even when his friends invite him to play, he just shakes his head. He doesn't laugh like he used to. Is something going on at home?" Her words lodged in my throat. Forcing a smile, I gave a vague reply. "It's probably just the change in environment. Don't worry too much." But deep inside, unease swelled like an unseen wave rising higher and higher, warning me that something was weighing heavily on my grandson's little heart. On the way home, Caleb sat beside me in silence. He didn't fidget, didn't ask questions the way he usually did. He just stared out the window. The evening breeze ruffled his hair, and in the fading light, his face looked weary, far too old for a boy of 7. Suddenly, he tugged at my sleeve, hesitating as though summoning all his courage. "Grandma, I don't want to go home to Sabrina." The words made my chest tighten. I turned to him and saw his wide eyes filled with fear and a quiet desperation. It wasn't the sulking of a child, it was a deep sorrow, a silent cry for help. His voice trembled, yet his words were firm. She doesn't love me, Grandma." Hearing that felt like a blade to my heart. For a child so young to speak such words meant the loneliness inside him had already grown unbearably heavy. I pulled him close, pressing his face against my chest, hiding the tears that threatened to fall. In that moment, I understood that sometimes the faintest voice of a child is the loudest warning bell. Adults often think children are too naive to understand the world, but the truth is, their hearts are finely tuned. They know who truly loves them and who only wears a mask. And if we refuse to listen, we may lose our one chance to protect them from the deepest hurts. The words my grandson whispered on that roadside days ago still echoed in my ears, haunting me. They gnawed at my heart so much that, sitting beside Caleb at the wedding banquet, I found myself watching his every small gesture with sharpened attention. And then it happened. Just as the appetizers were served, waiters moved in with polished silver trays, placing gleaming plates of shrimp before each guest as if it were some grand ritual. The sauce glistened under the candlelight, the sweet briny scent rising into the air while guests murmured their approval. But Caleb was different. He stared hard at the shrimp set before him, then suddenly shoved the plate away with force, as though he needed to banish it from reach. The sight froze me in place. Caleb was a gentle child, never one to act out. I knew instantly why. He had a severe shellfish allergy. Just the smallest bite could endanger his life. And the way he pushed that plate away, decisive, almost desperate, made my heart race with terror. Before I could even speak, Caleb's little red toy car slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor. He bent down instinctively to pick it up, but then froze. His eyes widened, round with shock, staring into the shadows beneath the table. His face went pale, his small hand trembling as he clutched at mine. His voice cracked, nearly breaking into tears. "Grandma, look." A cold shiver ran straight down my spine. My throat went dry as my trembling hand lifted the edge of the white tablecloth. Candlelight flickered across the floorboards. And then I saw it. Right next to Caleb's tiny shoes lay a folded piece of paper, silent and waiting, as if meant to be discovered at this very moment. I picked it up, my pulse pounding so hard it felt like a hammer against my chest. The paper shook between my fingers as I slowly unfolded it. Under the unsteady glow of candlelight, jagged, hurried words appeared, scrawled in crooked letters. Table 8, add extra shrimp to the child's meal. In that instant, my blood turned to ice. My ears rang, my breath caught, and it felt as though the ground had dropped beneath me. Around me, laughter, the clink of glasses, the soft rise and fall of jazz music all continued, but they seemed to come from a distant, hollow world. In my eyes, there was only the note, a chilling proof of a plan meant to harm my grandson. And the most horrifying part was this. The scheme was unfolding in plain sight, in the middle of his father's wedding, wrapped in the glittering facade of celebration. I couldn't sit still for another second. I gripped Caleb's hand, handed him to Lily, told her to hold him tight, and hurried out into the corridor. My heart pounded. The folded paper clenched in my fist felt like a living piece of proof. Outside the bar, a few young servers were clustered together, laughing and joking, completely unaware that inside me, a storm of fury and fear was raging. I spotted Jason Tran, the server who'd brought food to our table several times. His face was still so young, gentle, nothing like someone who would plot harm, but I had no patience left. I walked straight up to him, holding the note out, my voice shaking but sharp. "You, tell me the truth. Who gave you this paper?" When Jason saw the paper, his face went blank. The innocent smile that had been there a moment before disappeared. His lips trembled, his eyes opened wide, as if he'd been pushed off a cliff. He stammered, "Oh, this fell when I was carrying the tray." I took another step closer, almost nose to nose, my voice hard. Who gave it to you?" Jason backed up until his spine nearly hit the wall, his hands waving as if to push the responsibility away. His voice trembled, each word choked. A woman. I don't know her name. She just slipped it into my hand and told me to bring it to the kitchen. I swear I didn't know what was written on it. I didn't know anything. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He swallowed and his hands shook, eyes pleading for mercy. I stared into those frightened eyes and knew he was just a pawn. That truth made my blood boil even more. Someone coldly planned this, using an inexperienced server to carry out a horrific scheme. Who Who could be cruel enough to try to harm my grandson on his father's wedding day? At that moment, Gregory Shaw's voice came from inside over the microphone, bright and cheerful. "Please take your seats. Main course will be served shortly." His announcement hit me like a blade across the back. Time was no longer on my side. If I stayed silent any longer, the main dishes would go out, and the life-threatening trap could close at any moment. I took a deep breath, crushed the paper until it creased, and turned back toward the ballroom. One thought filled my mind. This must be exposed right now. I walked back into the ballroom, my heart still pounding, the paper crushed tight in my hand. The music played on, glasses clinked, laughter rippled through the hall. But to me, it all felt unsteady, as though the floor itself might give way. I marched straight to table 8, rose to my feet, and called out loud enough to cut through the music. "Everyone, please stop for a moment. Before the main course is served, I have something that must be addressed." The room fell silent at once. The band stopped playing, heads turned, all eyes fixed on me, waiting for an explanation. Caleb pressed himself close to Lily, his small hands clutching her arm, his face white with fear. I lifted the note high, forcing my voice steady. "Who wrote this? Who gave the order to add shrimp to the child's meal at table 8? Nathan hurried over, his face pale, his hands trembling as I handed him the paper. He opened it, his eyes skimming the scrawled words, then looking up at me, his voice breaking. "Mom, what is this? How could this even happen?" My son, usually so calm, was shaken to the core. That was when Sabrina appeared. The sharp rhythm of her heels echoed on the floor as she approached, her white gown sweeping with each step. Her smile stretched across her face, but it was forced, almost brittle. She smoothed her dress, adjusted her meticulously styled hair, then spoke in a voice that was sweet but edged with ice. "What's going on? It's nothing but a silly joke. Are you really going to disrupt this wedding over a piece of paper you found under a tablecloth?" She spoke as though trying to soothe the crowd, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of tension. Guests began whispering. A few phones lit up as people recorded. I steadied myself, my voice clear, deliberate. "This is no joke. My grandson has a severe shellfish allergy. Everyone here knows that. Even a single bite could be dangerous. And this note specifically instructs adding shrimp to the child at table 8. Sabrina's brows furrowed, but she shot back quickly, her tone shifting toward irritation. "There's no name on that note. How can you accuse anyone? You're making a spectacle out of nothing." Her voice sharpened, trying to turn suspicion back on me. "Maybe you're overreacting. Have you even thought this through?" Her words made some guests shake their heads. A few even smiled faintly, as though siding with her dismissal. But others frowned, eyes narrowing with doubt. No one declared her guilty. They only saw a clash between an old woman and the bride on her wedding day. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I didn't scream or hurl accusations. I held the paper firmly, looking her straight in the eye. "I'm not rushing to judgment. I'm telling you a note was placed under the table. And if someone is playing a dangerous game with a child's life, we have to stop and find out now." The air grew heavy. Guests waited in tense silence. Sabrina stood there, her smile still fixed for the crowd, but her body language and tone revealed flashes of defensiveness, denial, deflection, a refusal to take responsibility. Still, no further evidence had surfaced, and I, clutching the note, knew I had to drag the truth into the light, even if it meant shaking the entire wedding to its core. The air in the hall was strung tight as a wire, ready to snap at the slightest touch. I hadn't even opened my mouth when Lily suddenly shot to her feet. Her chair scraped back and crashed against the floor with a sharp thud. Her face burned red, her eyes blazing with a fury she had kept locked inside for far too long. One arm clutched Caleb tightly to her chest, the other trembled with anger. Her voice rang out, strong and unwavering, cutting through the crowd of hundreds. "Enough! Everyone here can see how terrified Caleb is whenever he's near you. He's not making this up. And I swear I will never let anyone lay a hand on him again." Her words sliced through the whispers like a blade. Silence fell. Lily turned to face Sabrina, her eyes fierce, filled with both pain and rage. And before anyone could even process what was happening, Lily's hand flew up and came down in a flash. The crack of the slap rang out, sharp and brutal, shattering the glossy facade of the evening. Guests gasped, chairs shifted, voices rose in alarm. Sabrina froze. Her face went rigid, eyes wide with shock, her hand flying to the cheek that had just been struck. The flawless mask of lipstick and powder faltered, and for a split second, the delicate facade she had worn all evening crumbled away. Before anyone could recover, a broken sob rose from the end of the table. Emily Monroe, Sabrina's younger sister, stood trembling, her face flushed, her hands clamped over her mouth as tears streamed down her pale blue dress. Her voice cracked, stuttering between gasps. I'm sorry. She told me to do it. She gave me the note, told me to pass it to the server. I didn't know. I never thought. The confession hit like a lightning strike. The hall erupted. Chairs scraped loudly, guests gasped and whispered, voices swelling into a chaotic roar. Some clutched their chests, others stared wide-eyed at one another. Phones flashed, recording every second of the scandal. Nathan stood frozen, his eyes locked on his bride. The healthy color drained from his face, leaving him pale as paper. I saw his hands clench so tightly his knuckles whitened, veins bulging, his whole body trembling with rage barely contained. I drew in a steadying breath and spoke, my voice heavy but clear. If anyone still has doubts, this place is full of cameras. We can check the footage right now. The moment the words left my mouth, the room fell into suffocating silence. Every eye in the hall turned, piercing toward Sabrina. She bit her lip, her gaze darting desperately, searching for an escape. But there was nothing left to cling to. In that silence, her refusal to speak became the loudest answer of all. The hall grew unbearably heavy, the silence so sharp you could hear the quick, ragged breaths of everyone present. Nathan stood frozen as if turned to stone. Then, all at once, he wrenched a chair beside him, the scrape of wood against the floor shrieking through the air. His hand shook violently as he thrust a finger toward Sabrina. His voice was hoarse, splintered into pieces, grinding through clenched teeth. You tried to harm my son. On our wedding day." The sound tore through the room, slamming into every heart. The crowd erupted, gasps and cries of, "Oh my God!" rising like a wave. Glasses toppled, shattering on the floor, red wine spreading across the tiles like spilled blood. I gripped my hands together to keep them from trembling, then pulled Caleb tight against Lily's chest. The boy shook like a leaf, his eyes swimming with terror. My voice was old but steady, every word cutting the air. "Whoever dares to harm my grandson will never set foot in this family again." Each syllable fell like the stroke of a blade, a line that could never be crossed. The relatives could no longer stay seated. Louis Bramwell, a large, usually quiet man, slammed his palm on the table, the crack echoing like thunder. His face flushed crimson with rage, his voice booming. "This is the lowest of the low! Never has this family endured such disgrace." Guests flinched, startled out of composure. On the other side, Clarence Whitlow sprang to his feet, his chair toppling backward. His face had gone pale with fury, his finger stabbing the air at Sabrina. "You have no place in this family." "Enough! Enough!" His whole body shook, his voice thunderous above the chaos. Chairs scraped, voices roared, the room swelling with outrage like a storm sweeping across the hall. Women covered their mouths, eyes brimming with tears of shock. Men shook their heads, some muttering in disbelief. Unthinkable. Unforgivable. At that moment, 2 hotel security officers strode in, uniforms crisp, their expressions grave. They stopped before Nathan, awaiting instruction. His voice was low, steady, but cold as steel. "Escort her out. Now." Sabrina let out a piercing cry, struggling against their grip, but no words came to defend her. Her eyes blazed, her lips quivered, but only ragged, broken breaths escaped. The white gown dragged across the floor, threads unraveling as she was led away under a barrage of stares as sharp as blades. Behind her, the whispers erupted, no longer veiled but steeped in scorn. Disgusting. At her own wedding against a child? Unforgivable. And so, the hall that had glowed with candlelight, filled with music and laughter, transformed into a court of judgment. There, before hundreds of witnesses, Sabrina's true face was stripped bare, leaving her no refuge, no defense, and no way back. After that night, my family fell into a long tremor that would not let go. What was supposed to be a wedding day of joy had turned into a stain no one could ever erase. Word spread quickly, like wind through dry fields. By the next morning, the phone rang nonstop. Some called to check on us, some to scold. Others only sighed heavily, as if to say my family had brought shame upon the entire bloodline. No matter how the words were dressed, concern or judgment, they pierced me like needles, one after another. I still remember clearly, just a few days later, the phone rang again. On the line was Mrs. Irene Doyle, a distant relative who had seldom cared for us. Her voice was icy, with not a trace of compassion. "Eleanor, how could you let this happen? The whole family is talking. Your son couldn't even hold his house together, letting that woman humiliate us right in the middle of a wedding. It's disgraceful." I listened quietly, letting her finish, then answered with calm resolve, "Irene, all I know is that I protected my grandson. What others choose to think is their concern." Then I hung up. Still, my heart burned raw as if someone had rubbed salt into an open wound. Nathan, my once strong son, once my greatest pride, now spent hours sitting in silence inside his study. He skipped meals, staring blankly into nothing, as though putting himself on trial. Lines of guilt carved deep into his forehead. One night, as I passed by, I overheard him whisper in the darkness, voice choked, "Mom, it's my fault. I didn't see through her. I brought the wrong person into this home." Then he stopped, unable to say another word, as though the weight of his own voice was too much to bear. And yet, even after all that, Sabrina would not let go. More than once, she appeared at our door, dressed to perfection, her voice dripping with sweetness as she pleaded, "Nathan, please, give me a chance." I was misunderstood, I can explain. But Nathan only stood at the doorway, his face gaunt, his eyes cold as steel. He was no longer the soft-hearted man he once had been. He spoke clearly, each word closing the door forever. "Leave. In this house, there will never be a place for you again." Then he shut the door hard, leaving her cries and desperate knocking to echo uselessly in the night air. I stood behind him, watching my son. I knew the choice had torn his heart in two, but it was also the first time I saw him sever, once and for all, the poison that had tormented our family for far too long. It pained me, but I knew I could not allow myself to sink into bitterness. Because above everything else, I had a child who still needed my protection. Caleb, after all he had endured, had become even more sensitive. Loud noises frightened him. Sudden sounds made him flinch. He clung to me or Lily as though letting go would leave him adrift. The once clear eyes of innocence now carried a shadow of fear. I knew I had to build for him a safe zone, a home where no deceit or cruelty could ever touch him. So each morning I cooked a warm breakfast with my own hands so that when he opened his eyes, he would know the day always began with peace. At night, Lily and I took turns sitting by his bed, telling him stories until sleep came. I refused to let any darkness creep into his young soul again. I told Lily, we must make sure he never feels alone. She nodded, her eyes burning with a quiet determination. I know the aftershocks of that cursed wedding will haunt us for a long time, but I also know this. From now on, Lily and I will be the unbreakable circle around Caleb, so that he will always understand, after betrayal and danger, after fear and heartbreak, that true family love is the only place where he will ever be safe to grow. After the storm of scandal and whispers, our home slipped back into a quieter rhythm. Yet each of us still carried invisible scars. Nathan spoke less than ever, his eyes distant as though locked in endless self-reproach. Caleb withdrew further, clinging only to me or to Lily. We were like a cracked wall, fragile and ready to crumble with one more hard blow. And it was in that fragile silence that Lily quietly stepped into the empty spaces, her hands stitching our brokenness back together, thread by thread. She never claimed to be doing anything extraordinary. She simply tended to the smallest details. Each morning, while I was still preparing breakfast, Lily packed Caleb's lunchbox. Inside were the foods he loved: Neat rice balls, a few slices of carefully cut fruit, a little portion of vegetables for balance, and always there was a small slip of paper in her tidy handwriting. No shrimp. Allergy. Beside it, she would draw a smiling face or a tiny heart in colored ink. It was such a simple gesture, but I watched Caleb's eyes brighten every time he opened that box. He carried to school not just a meal, but a sense of safety, the assurance that someone cared, someone remembered him. In the afternoons, Lily often took Caleb to the park. From a bench, I watched their figures dart across the wide green field, running free under the sky. Some days they flew kites, and as the bright kite dipped and soared, Caleb's laughter returned little by little, after weeks of silence. Once he stumbled, scraping his knee. Tears welled up, his face crumpling. Lily knelt immediately, brushing off the dust, blowing gently on the wound, and whispered, "It's okay, little warrior. This scar will remind you that you're stronger than yesterday." Caleb listened, his crying stopped, and a flicker of childish pride lit his face before he ran off again. I sat there, my heart tightening yet filling with an indescribable gratitude. Then came the night Caleb burned with fever again. His body was hot as fire, his breath labored, every sound ragged. Nathan and I were frantic. I fumbled through drawers for medicine while he paced back and forth helplessly, lost in panic. But Lily remained steady, almost unnervingly calm. She sat at the bedside, pressing a cool cloth to Caleb's forehead, stroking his hair, whispering stories to ease his breathing. All through the night, she never left him, dark circles forming under her eyes, yet she never uttered a word of complaint. Watching her there, for an instant, I saw Isabel again, the same gentleness, the same fierce love, wrapping this fragile child in a cocoon of warmth. Nathan stood in the doorway, eyes fixed, unblinking. For the first time since the nightmare of the wedding, I saw something new in his weary face. His eyes were red, but inside them flickered gratitude and a spark of hope he had long since lost. As he watched Lily care for his son, I knew he recognized it too. This was real happiness, the kind he once had and thought was gone forever, now returning in a quiet, unexpected glow. And in that dimly lit room, with Caleb's hot breath breaking the silence, with Lily's soothing whispers filling the night, I realized something. No wedding gown, no glittering ceremony could ever bring peace to a home. What truly pushes back the darkness, what lights a tunnel when all else has gone dark, is love in its purest form. The simple, steady love of a woman who puts the life of a child above all else and carries a flame in her heart that never goes out. That night, the little kitchen glowed softly under the warm yellow light. The table was nothing fancy, just a plate of steaming pasta I had set down, with a side of toasted bread. Nathan sat quietly at the head of the table, his eyes tired but trying to hold a smile for Caleb. Lily leaned forward, pouring water with a familiarity that felt as if she had been part of this rhythm for a long time. Caleb sat in the middle, clutching a small spoon, his cheeks flushed pink from a day of play. I scooped another helping of pasta onto his plate, but before I could say a word, he suddenly lifted his head. His eyes, clear and sparkling, like they carried the night sky inside them, met ours, and in a voice small but steady, he said, "I want Aunt Lily to be my mom." The entire room fell silent. The spoon slipped from Lily's hand and clinked softly against the plate, a sound that seemed to shatter the air around us. Her face flushed, her hands twisted together under the table, and she bowed her head, unable to hide the tear rolling down her cheek. Nathan froze in his chair, as if all the breath had been pulled from his lungs. He stared at his son, eyes wide and unblinking, before slowly lowering them. His gaze grew misty, heavy with regret, but also with something gentler, a fragile kind of relief. My chest tightened as I sat there. The innocence of those words was like a blade reopening old wounds, but at the same time, they carried the power of a balm, pointing us toward a new path. Nathan lifted a hand to cover his face, his shoulders shaking as he choked out, "Son, I'm sorry. I failed to protect you. I let you suffer more than you ever should have." Lily raised her head, trembling, her lips quivering as she whispered, I never thought I deserved that place. But if Caleb truly wants it, I promise I'll love him as my own for the rest of my life. I placed my worn hand firmly on Nathan's shoulder, gripping tight, and spoke with the weight of everything we had endured. Real happiness isn't found in glittering gowns or grand banquets. It comes from sincerity, from true love and steadfast care. A family only stands strong when it's built on love. In that moment, I looked around at the simple meal before us and saw it clearly. After all the heartbreak, a new door had opened. Not one lit by spotlights and false smiles, but by the quiet glow of human kindness, the kind of love that, though unassuming, is strong enough to drive out every shadow. That night, when all was quiet, I sat by the window looking out at the garden. The silver moonlight spread across the grass, glimmering as if a thin veil of frost had been laid over it. Caught high in the branches at the end of the lane was a kite Caleb and Lily had flown earlier that afternoon. Its string had snapped, leaving it tangled, but it still trembled in the wind, reaching upward as though it longed to soar again. I gazed at it and felt a quiet hope stir inside me. Even when life frays and breaks, you can still cling to a branch, endure, and wait for the day you rise once more. In that moment, I understood something. Family is not only about blood. Family is a choice, a decision to hold one another's hands, to shelter one another, to refuse to abandon each other when storms come. Caleb had chosen Lily, and with her genuine heart, Lily had chosen to love him as her own flesh and blood. To me, that is the truest kind of home, the place where the heart finds peace. I ended the long day with that thought. Outside, the moon still shone, the kite still hung in the branches, and in my heart, the light of family, simple but steadfast, still glowed, guiding us forward. Or the story you just heard has been adapted with names and places changed to protect the privacy of those involved. I do not share this to cast blame or judgment, but in the hope that someone, somewhere, may pause and reflect. How many children, how many mothers, how many grandmothers are silently enduring struggles inside their own homes? If you were in my place, what would you choose? To stay silent for the sake of appearances, or to stand up and protect what matters most? I truly want to hear your thoughts because sometimes honest sharing becomes a candle that lights the way for someone else. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share so that others may also find what they need. May God bless you and bring peace to your family. I still believe that courage and love will always lead us toward brighter days. See you again in the next story.